Hello and welcome to an overview of character creation in the Star Wars role-playing game by Fantasy Flight Games. This is going to be for those new players who maybe haven't played the game before, and we're just going to go into how to create a character and hopefully a pretty concise video. So there are going to be 8 steps that we'll talk about. The first is character concept and background, then starting obligation, then species, career and specialization, spending starting XP, determining derived attributes, starting motivations, and gear and description. So these steps are a little strange. I think a lot of these could be moved around, especially the starting motivations, as well as the determining derived attributes, and also the description of the character. I think those could be added onto kind of the first part, creating the concept and background. However, for some reason in the book and in this setup, they chose to put them closer to the end. So it is up to you kind of how you want to order things, but we'll kind of go through the steps as they're listed. And the first part is obviously creating your character concept and background. There are different ways that you can approach this. I think one of the easier ways might be to think of your career first and to think of what type of character you might want to play. Do you want to be a smuggler, a pilot, more maybe a cunning character, something like that? You might want to be a mechanic, someone who is a slicer, maybe who hacks into computers, or you might want to be a force sensitive type of character. So that might be a good way to start. You could also start with a species. Let's say there's a particular species you really want to play. You might start with that. But really, if you haven't created a character in some other type of role-playing game before, you want to just start asking yourself questions. What type of character do I want to play? What was their life like growing up? Are they rich? Are they poor? Are they middle class? Are they an outsider? Are they someone who has a lot of contacts, or maybe stays a little off the grid? Do they support the Empire, or are they opposed to it? What type of people do they have around them in their life? Are they from the Outer Rim, or are they from maybe the core worlds? So all these questions you can kind of ask yourself, and it might help you create kind of a vision of what your character can be. I think another really good thing to do during this part is to come up with some names and some contacts. So, if you're speaking to other characters or introducing yourself, you can have people that you can bring up. You'll be able to have conversations with people. I think as a GM, one of the more difficult things to deal with is a player who comes with a character that isn't prepared, that don't have much of a background. So when you try to kind of engage them in conversation, they're not really sure what to say. So I think it's important to have around 3 paragraphs of introduction ready. If you want to do less than that, that's fine. But I think 3 paragraphs is good, and it's a good way to start. And the book does lay out certain possibilities for what your background might be. You could be down and out. You could, and a lot of this ties into like your motivations and also your obligations. So we'll go into obligation a little bit. It can be a little confusing. So basically, when you're choosing an obligation, you're thinking about a certain debt or responsibility that your character has that is kind of unavoidable, something that you will have to deal with at some point in your game. Even if, let's say, you're not actively dealing with it, it's something that is always in the back of your mind. That's really what the obligation is about. And really, when going through obligation, there are some options here. So some common ones, addiction, blackmail, you're a criminal, duty bound, you have a favor to owe to someone, you're obsessed with something, betrayal, bounty, debt, family, oath, responsibility. So just adds to kind of your character, and it fleshes out your character a bit. I think a lot of these can be really fun to play. I think bounty is one that is pretty common. Someone, you have a bounty on your head and you're just trying to run away from some bounty hunters. It's a fun one to choose. And it also ties into, you can add obligation during character creation, and basically the obligation is bad. You do not want to have too much obligation because it will affect your group. Your group has a pool of obligation, so if you add extra obligation to it, it basically increases the chance of someone having to deal with obligation in a session. So if you choose to add either 5 or 10 obligation, you can get extra XP, or credits from it, which is very good. If I do take obligation, I tend to go for the credits because it's nice to be, to have a lot when you're kind of starting out, and you want to have some good items. However, again, if everyone in the group takes extra obligation, it's going to make it very difficult for you to avoid dealing with it. So it can have negative impacts if you choose obligation. So that's a quick overview. Basically, you just want to choose something from the table and kind of incorporate it into your background. Next, we have the species. Some players might know right away what species they want to be. Others might want to kind of choose a species based on the career that they're going into, or if there's a certain type of character they want to play, there's a characteristic they want to focus on, they might choose one based off that. So what I mean is, if you look over in the first section, you have these characteristics, and these are associated with the skills. So when you are checking for a skill, when you're doing, you could do a skill for combat, you could do a deception check, you could do an athletics check if you're trying to, lift something heavy or do something, move around in an athletic way. You will roll some dice, and the higher numbers you have in these characteristics, the more dice you'll be able to use, which is good. So when picking a species, it might be good to consider what characteristic you want to focus on, and then maybe pick a character with a 3 in that characteristic so that you can start off kind of on the right foot. So there are many species you can come up with or use. You can also homebrew something as long as it's fair and balanced. And then there are also other stats that will come along with the species that you choose, particularly the wound threshold, which is basically your XP. And that is, a certain number plus your brawn rating. So if we look at the Alina, the first one, their brawn rating is 1 and their wound threshold's 8 plus the brawn. So they would have a 9 wound threshold, which is not very good. And then strain, you can kind of think of it as mana in a way. It's really the energy that you use. It's mental capacity. It's your willpower. And this is something that can be used in order to, kind of expel extra energy in order to do something. And this is kind of the same as your wound threshold. It's a number plus your willpower rating. And then in addition, you will get your XP amount. So each species will have a certain amount of XP that they start with. And you can also get certain abilities with each species. So that is, overview of the species. You can kind of, again, look around, figure out which ability or characteristic you want to focus on, and then go from there, or just pick whatever interests you the most. So next, we'll move into the career and specialization. So you will, of course, pick the career first. And then you can choose a specialization within that career that will come with a little bit of extra. We'll talk about talents in a little bit. These are just some of the careers you can choose from. And again, it might be good to start with this. It might be good to think, what type of character do I want to play? Do I want to be a bounty hunter? Do I want to be maybe an intelligent character? So maybe I want to be a colonist, someone who's good at speaking and knowing things. Maybe I want to be a trader, so you could pick an explorer. Or if you want to be combat focused, you could be a hired gun, or a range character, something like that. So there are many different options for this, and a good thing to note is each career comes with certain abilities that it specializes in, and when you use XP in order to get skills, you'll get a discount based on these abilities. And the same goes for the specialization that you choose. You will get a discount. And it's good to note, when you pick your career, you will get 4 free ranks in your skills. And then same for the specialization, you get 2. So when you create your character, you should have 6 free ranks in any of these skills that are either in the career or your specialization. And if anyone is watching and is confused about how the skills work, so when I say a free rank, I mean 1 rank, on in the skill. And again, this just adds to the amount of dice that you're using when you check for this. And the more dice you have, or the better type of dice you have, the better that you'll do on these rolls. And if you want to know more about the dice, I did do a dice guide in my first video. But basically, the way the ranks work is if you have a career skill, so one of these that's listed under your career, they cost 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and that's XP in order to buy. If it's a non-career skill, it would cost 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, so 5 more per rank. So again, you get the discount for your career skills. So that is career and specializations, kind of a quick overview. Here are the careers and specializations from Age of Rebellion and also Force and Destiny as well. And so that leads us into XP. So again, you get your starting XP number from the species that you choose. And, if you have extra obligation, you can also add a little bit of XP to that if you've chosen that as an option. And there are several things you can spend XP on. The first is your characteristics. So these are the numbers for the species that I mentioned before, and this is something that you can only increase during character creation. So after you create the character, you cannot bump up these numbers at all. And this is really good to note because it means that you might want to spend a lot of your starting XP on increasing these. And for each number that you want to increase it by, it costs 10 times that number. So let's say you have a 3 in agility, and you want to move it up to a 4, you would have to pay 40 in order to do that, 40 XP, which is quite a lot. And it doesn't just add 10 per level, you have to spend 10 times that number for each level. So, but I think my suggestion is to spend as much as you can on characteristics, because again, you won't be able to later on. So it's good to do that. And each characteristic cannot go above a 5 during creation. You can also use XP in order to buy ranks and skills. So again, we went over the career cost, starting at 5, it costs 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So you get a discount. And then non-career skills, it's 10. And then it's also good to note that when you're choosing ranks and skills, you cannot go above a 2 during creation because you don't want your character to be too strong. And then I mentioned talents. So for each specialization, there is a talent tree, and these are basically abilities that you can activate. They are situational, and they, of course, apply to the specialization that you're in. So you can, you basically have to buy them in order. There is a certain order that you have to purchase the skills in. And my recommendation is to spend the most XP on characteristics in character creation, then spend a little bit on your skills, and then maybe get a couple, 1 or 2 talents, because these will not be as important to the game. But that's just, kind of my strategy. You can, if you want to focus on the talents only, that's cool too. And then the last thing you can spend XP on is another specialization. So it costs 10 times the number of specializations you already have. So if you want to get 1 extra specialization, it costs 10 XP. So you can do that. You can have more than 1, which is kind of cool. And there's no limit. It just depends on how much XP you have to spend. So that is spending XP. If you do have questions about any of this, feel free to leave them in the comments. I am kind of doing this quickly just to, get an overview of everything. And then determining derived attributes is the next section here. Again, you could do a lot of this earlier on. So if you pick your species, you can already do the wound threshold and the strain. Defense is usually something that you will get from items. And basically it makes it more difficult for other characters to attack you. And then soak is another form of defense. You can think of it as, amount of damage that you can ignore when someone attacks you. So let's say you have a soak of 2, someone attacks you for 5 damage, you will soak up 2 of that and you'll take 3 damage. So that's how soak works. And it equals your brawn, but you can also add more from armor and things like that. So, and talents as well. So that is the attributes. And then the motivations, I said this is something you could do also if you want to do during the background, do earlier on. You can pick from, there are many different options, or you can make up your own. And this just adds kind of flavor to your character. It's something to work towards. It's a goal that your character has. And I think a lot of characters will choose ambition. They want something specific in order to kind of move up. And also a cause. I think overthrow the empire or support the empire. Those are very, very common choices for a lot of characters. And relationships are a little less common. I don't see these as much, but I would love to see someone do a pet kind of as a motivation. I've never seen that before, so there are some interesting ones here. But yeah, this is just something that your character is working towards, something that they're interested in, just a part of their life. It adds more to the background. So that's really all the motivation is. And then the last step is gear and description. So description is pretty simple. It's just what is their height, weight, build, what is their hair and eye color, the color of their skin, do they have any scars, marks, or tattoos, and what is the personality like. So this could help you when you're role playing. It also might be good, let's say you want to use a voice, it might be good to just kind of think of what the voice is, practice it a little bit, really kind of get into your character. So that's the description aspect of it. And then gear is really the last step. Your character is pretty much complete besides buying some gear. And in Star Wars, basically every character starts with 500 credits. However, if you did take the extra obligation and you get more credits, you can get up to 3,000, which is really great. And so, I would recommend getting a weapon of some kind, even if you're not combat focused. There are ranged weapons as well as melee weapons. And the number, so you have the damage, you have the crit number. We won't go into crit in this video. Also the range of the weapon, encumbrance, I don't use too much. It is, so I generally don't use it, just too much to kind of think about. And then the HP of the weapon. So how strong the weapon is, and then the prices here. Most weapons are pretty expensive, so if you start off with 500 credits, you're not going to be having, the greatest weapon. And we also have the rarity here and special, so these are abilities of weapons. So I may go into these a little bit more in another guide at some point. But yeah, here are some other weapons. We have slug throwers, thrown weapons, explosives, melee weapons. So that might be, what you spend a lot of your money on, but you can also get armor. And again, we went over defense is here. Defense is really strong. And then also you can add extra soak as well if you want. And finally, there are kind of general gear and equipment items. So these are, it's really up to you. I would say don't spend too much on these. Just kind of figure out which ones are most important. I would say stim packs are really nice to have because they will heal you, a little bit. But kind of look through these, pick out what you think is most important, and go from there. So that is my overview of character creation in Star Wars. So thank you all for watching. Again, if you do have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And I will see you all soon.